what it comes down to whenever you're doing any kind of presentation, whether you're doing it on video, whether you're doing it in front of folks in person, it comes down to your audience is building the relationship with you. Your slides, your images are not the presentation. You are the presentation. So as you go forward to present, be true to yourself, speak from your heart, and enjoy every minute of it.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce. I'm host of the Visual Lounge, where we talk about using images and video in the workplace. Today, on today's show, we've always got great shows for you. I hope you guys like what we're doing here on the show, but always let us know, like, subscribe, send me an email, whatever it might be. But today we're going to be talking with Leslie Chamberlain, and we're going to be talking about this idea of how can you move to getting to a presentation faster. Now, that presentation, we're going to see if it can apply to, like, if it's just presentations or if these principles could also apply to things like videos or using images to help you create the presentation. Maybe your image will tell the story here for you. So let's go ahead and introduce Leslie as we get started today. Meet Leslie Chamberlain, the powerhouse of customer success with over 15 years of experience. Leslie's passion for delighting customers and driving business growth is simply contagious, and I agree with that. Based in Chicago, Illinois, Leslie thrives on delivering game-changing solutions in the fast-paced world of SaaS and nonprofit organizations. Her leadership spark has ignited high-performing teams, achieving remarkable Net Promoter Scores, customer satisfaction, or CSATs, ratings, and extraordinary retention rates. With expertise in customer success strategies, data, wizardry, and effective team leadership, Leslie is a true champion of excellence. She's known for transforming startups and establishing companies alike with her unstoppable drive. What is Leslie's secret sauce? Well, it's embracing new technology, proactively solving challenges, and turning customer success data into pure gold. She is the go-to guru for developing high-performing teams and driving results. You can connect with her on LinkedIn to infuse passion into your customer success journey, and we look forward to having her join us in infusing some success with us here on the Visual Lounge. Please help me welcome Leslie Chamberlain. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, Matt. Thanks so much. That was fun.
Yeah, it is. I love reading people's bios. It's so fun. Sometimes people are like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that. And sometimes people are like, yeah, that's me. It's awesome. And I'm like, no, I love it. They are so awesome. And I'm just so excited you've been here. Now, to be fair, I think you came on a panel show with the Visual Lounge. So this is not your first foray into us, but I'm excited to have you here to chat with us.
Yeah, this is great. I'm psyched.
All right. Well, Leslie, let's start where we always start. So first of all, let's talk about how'd you get involved in customer success and using, obviously a lot of jobs require presentations, but tie these things together for us. How do you get going?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off actually as in music. So that was my first career was as a music therapist, and really presenting and being in front of folks was what I had to do day to day. And so as I made the transition actually from Peace Corps, where I had to do a lot of presentations, had to be in front of a lot of folks, moved back to the United States and started working in higher ed. And that focus really was where I needed to be presenting a lot more. And I had a really wonderful mentor when I started at DePaul University, Dr. Joel Whalen, and he trained me, and I began teaching his course, Effective Business Communication, to marketing students. And that's when I got into this thing we're going to talk about today, which is how to do it really quickly and easily and not dig yourself a hole when someone tells you got to present in front of folks.
Yeah, I mean, what an important skill nowadays. And I'm sure the landscape around us has changed a little bit with presentations because, it used to be you'd walk into a boardroom and you'd give a presentation or an office, but now it could be that. But it could be Zoom. It could be, you could be thrown in. I recently was thrown into Teams, and I don't use Teams. Or it's like, I felt so like fish out of water, right? And it was like, okay, what do I do? And that's not obviously probably the key part of the presentation, but I'm sure it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I'm psyched to share the tools. I think they really apply across the board. It was actually ideas that started in the 60s and 70s from a debate coach in Texas. I mean, it's
All right.
It's some old information that really that works. So
Hey, it's tried and proven. That's good. But
exactly.
before we dig into that though, so let me ask you this, because our second question we ask people is like, how do you define success? And I'm curious for you. Let's kind of narrow this. Let's narrow focus this a little bit, because we could say success for presentations, but I think that's probably depends on the presentation. We
Yeah.
could say generally customer education or things like that. But when you bring these together, typically, if you're a customer success individual or you're creating learning content for your
Yeah.
audience, internal, external, how do you find success for presentations? Because I think that is interesting. And maybe there's not a great answer. Maybe it's the same answer you'd give in those other scenarios, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I think the tricky part about presentations, right, is that we all have our own movies in our mind. And to be able to communicate that movie to someone else so they're sharing that same movie, that's the trick of it, right? We always, the example I always give is this child at the top of the stairs holding a ball, right? If you say that to someone, it seems basic enough, but everybody has a different child in their head. Everyone has a different ball in their head. Everyone has, maybe they're scared for that child, maybe they're excited for that child. There's so many different variables. But if you can create a story that is the same story in your listener's mind, then that's a successful presentation.
Yeah, I love it. Now, I am probably thinking that I'm scared of this child at the top of the stairs. I mean, there's all
Right.
sorts of children's stories, right? It's creepy. Why are they there? Who is this
Yes.
child they let into my house?
Yes. Why is this child in my house?
It's
Yes.
not my kid. Okay, so sorry, it's a day. I think people are gonna love this episode. So, Les, I'm curious. Obviously, let's again kind of stepping away from the presentation piece of it. We're a show that we talk about using images and video. We could tie this to presentations or just generally. What's a tip that you would give the audience about using images and video in their work? Again, it can be tied to presentations, but it could just be general as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think, and it does depend on your personality, right? You want to really infuse yourself in that presentation. Otherwise, it's not believable, right? And it really is about building that trust with your audience. And so for me, I want to have some images that are more playful. I want to have something that is sense rich and is going to connect to kind of how I am, what my energy is. And I think that's what folks need to keep in mind when they're doing those presentations. Think about who you are. What's something that's really connected to you, because you're the presentation, not the slides, not the words. It's you. They're building that relationship with you. So I think you got to infuse yourself in it.
Yeah, I just so some of our listeners will have seen this. We've done these a couple of different events. We call them level up events,
Yeah.
and we've had some great speakers. And I have the great privilege of presenting during most of them. And I've been doing a very different style of slide presentation, like visually a look than I do
Yeah.
normally. Like I go to a lot of events, I speak at a lot of events, and I tend to use very visual slide decks, very few words. Just kind of a almost like a metering device. Like here's what the topic is.
Yeah.
But for these particularly, I've drawn on every single slide, and I kind of have this like
Cool.
80s, 90s punk rock. What's the Scott Pilgrim
Yeah.
versus the World type.
Yes.
I don't know what the vibe is really. It's just something I'm like, oh, this looks like this will be fun. I love drawing on.
Yeah.
It's like a kid when you get the like. This is dating myself. When you get the TV guide and the TV guide will be
Yes.
sitting there, and you take the pen and you give the whoever's on the cover a mustache.
Yes. 100%. Always we did that. Always we did that. Yes.
Absolutely. So I love that. I love that idea. Like infuse who you are into that. It should come across that this is you. And I'm guessing. And let me ask you this: in that case, there's a difference between Matt Pierce, the individual, Matt
Yeah.
Pierce, the organization. So what role? Like how do you kind of should people focus on organizational kind of definition of the representative, or is it okay to be a little bit more individualistic?
I do think yes, there's that branding component that comes into what your organization is. But like I said, at the end of the day, they're building the relationship with you as the presenter. And if you are not connected in that, the trust isn't there. There's a lot of stuff we don't understand about how we build trust with folks, and I think we're as humans we're really good at understanding when something's off. right? When something doesn't feel like that
Mm-hmm.
genuine individual. And I think you have to add your genuine nature into it as well. Yes, of course you have to have, that branding. But yeah, it's then sometimes I don't want to get too deep into this, but sometimes if the brand is so different from who you are as an individual, then the question is, are you really in the right place in that organization? Like,
No,
wow.
totally right. Like, so what I'm hearing is there should be some connection there, right? Like it can't be so far afield because it creates a dissonance, and that dissonance
Yeah.
will cause people to not pay attention to what's
Hmm.
most important, and that's
Yeah.
whatever that message is. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate that, right? And finding, I guess it's a lot about finding the flexibility or the creativity that allows that to happen. Seems like.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Leslie, I want to talk to you more about presentations, and I just had this realization. I have to this week during this recording week. I have a presentation that I have to give next week. I have an audience that I'm always slightly familiar with.
Yeah.
I've not been to this event before. It's so I'm actually so we're gonna do some therapy here.
Let's try it out. Let's try it out.
So okay, so we're talking about making presentations faster, and sometimes I think obviously sometimes you have all the time in the world, and that's
Yeah.
great. I do not. I have a week.
Exactly.
And I know I've got 45 minutes I'm going to have to present on. Some of it's going to be demo, so that's kind of the easier part,
Yeah.
right? We've got that
Hmm.
plan. So where does someone start? They know they've
Yeah.
got this thing coming. Where do we get going?
Yes, absolutely. So you start with what's your big message? What's the big idea you want people to walk away with? So that's where you start. And honestly, write it down. You just say, here's my big idea. This is where I want people to leave with. And remember, moving forward, you may have 500 things in your head, which I think is where we all get caught up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to, be sure I tell them this and be sure I tell them this, and I got to get as much data as possible into there. No. What it comes down to is our minds are only capable of holding on to so much, right? So you want to have your big thing and you have two things. That's why it's called Nichols two things. You have your two ideas that you are going to repetitively come back to. So your big idea and the two ideas underneath that. And remember that we as humans, right? Remember the first thing you said, we remember the last thing you said, and we remember all the sense rich stuff in between. So are you talking about something that connects to smell and taste and touch? You want to really pull in stuff that's deep in our memory. That's the kind of stuff, those are the memories we keep on for a long time. So if you want people to walk away with that, with your presentation, first thing, last thing, and the sense rich messages in between. So two big things.
Okay. This is where I'm going to push you a little bit because
Yes.
I love what you're saying, and I can see
Yeah.
that how that works. But I can also hear people chatting in the
Yeah.
back of my head saying, I've got but I've got 12 things. How do I focus this?
How do you focus your two things? Yeah.
Yeah. So like, okay, the big idea might be I want them to do something, right? I want them to act in some way. I want them to, for me, a lot of times my message is
Yeah.
like, I want you to go and make your first video.
Yes.
Easy peasy,
Okay.
right? Like, I want you to go make your first video. So maybe the two things. So help me walk through this so we can
Yeah.
get, because I think a practical example here will
Yes, let's do
help
it.
our audience to be able to do this. And I'm loving this because I think from a video creation side, if you're think of a video as a presentation, just a different delivery medium, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So got
Awesome.
my big thing. I want you to go make your first video. What's
We're going to make a video. Yeah, that's your big message. You're going to make a video. So Matt, when you are thinking about what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about making a video?
start? Just
Start.
record something.
Okay. The first thing is start. Let's do the one idea is start.
Okay.
And then what's the next thing that comes to your mind?
My brain is so blank all of a sudden, Leslie. I can't ask me questions on my podcast. I'm supposed to ask you questions on the podcast. What have I done to myself? No, this is so I think, if I'm trying to get people to make their first video, I'm probably overcoming some type of objections, right? Like
Awesome.
I don't love my voice, I don't love my face, I don't love whatever.
Yep. Awesome. So two ideas, start and objections. So when you think about what has to be done to getting to start? What are two things that come to mind? If I'm going to start, what do I have to
Yeah.
do?
First thing, just pick a topic and push record. That's the two things.
Pick a topic, push record. There's your two things. So you've got make a video, you've got start, you've got pick a topic, push record. Cool. Now you've got objections. What are the two things you think about when you think about objections?
One, particularly customer education folks, learning and development folks. I don't like the sound of my voice.
Yep. I don't like the sound of my voice. What's another thing that comes to mind?
I don't have good gear. All I got is
Ah,
my webcam.
so me and my gear.
Yep.
So that's the objections, right? Me and my gear. Okay, so now we've broken down your Nichols two things. This is what everything's going to roll back to. So as you're presenting, and we'll talk more about some, how to start and how to finish, but you're coming through and you're going to be sharing about just start. Okay. And the first thing is pick a topic. What are two things that come to mind when you think about picking a topic?
So topic. So you keep breaking it. So I'm getting it. Like you keep breaking these down by two things.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little dense, but yeah. Okay. So I don't know that we need to keep going through this example
Yeah,
necessarily, but
right. But then the trick there, the two things under those are going to be you're going to take the idea and then you're going to think about how do I make this sense rich? How do I make this in a way that's really going to stick with people? So, say for example, it's getting started, and maybe it's, getting out of your way, right? Something like that. So rather than saying getting out of your way, you might say, you know, push aside all of the shove aside all of the foggy smoke or the smoke in your way, right? So you're getting this image. Now you have a sense rich message, a sense rich image of how to get that stuff out of your way. Then it also opens the door for you to put that image in there as you're presenting, right? You might be
right.
able to toss that, an image in there of somebody kind of like pushing through the muck to get started.
So in this process, because I'm
Yeah.
glad you went into the sense rich stuff because I do have some questions about this, right? So
Yeah.
obviously I love this idea, like you're breaking it down, two things, and obviously it depends on how far you want to take each one, right? I'm guessing,
Yeah.
your present, how much time you have, all that kind of stuff. But in the
Exactly.
sensory rich, so you're what I'm hearing, and I want to just recap for our viewer or for our viewers and listeners is that you're saying like actually use the language, right? Like as you're presenting, as you're talking, talk about this fog, pushing
Yes.
away the cloud of
Yeah.
confusion, right? And
Yes.
and then obviously the idea of the slides or the visuals is the reinforcement of that, so that kind of mind, brain, eyes, ears are
Yeah.
all bringing it together and saying like this is a cohesive thought. Because if I
Exactly.
put a ray of sunshine and I'm talking about pushing away clouds, maybe it's a little like, what? Why
Yes.
is there sunshine, right? I'm focused on the wrong
Yeah.
thing.
Exactly. And so then they walk away, and if you were to say to them, "Hey, what do you remember about Matt's presentation?" They're going to give you the first thing you said, which typically you want it to be like questions because our brains are little computers and we want to answer questions. So that's getting people engaged. Your call to action, which is at the end, and then all those sense rich images in between. So they're going to remember like, oh yeah, I remember he was saying like, I gotta just get out of that, shove that stuff away. I remember the image of it. I remember the language he used because again, that's deep in our brain. Those senses are deep. That's long-term memory. So
Mm.
that's the stuff you'll be able to get sticky in there with them.
Yeah, I'm really loving this as a concept and an approach to buildings. So I gotta imagine though, someone who you've done this a lot, you were
Yeah.
able to quickly take my idea and pull it down. I imagine people get stuck in this process. When you've
Yeah.
worked with people and going through this, where is it that you find that they get stuck in kind of breaking down or thinking of visual? What is the
Yeah.
part that makes this where we can help people to get better so they get less stuck?
Yeah. I think this is kind of interesting because it kind of relates to what you're saying about people doing the work. That they don't like their voice, they don't like their ideas, right? Like, oh, it's too me. And then we get into our own stuff. What I found a lot, I've taught this to like hundreds of students. where people get caught up is that sense rich message idea.
Mm.
Like, does this sound too dumb? Is this dumb? Do I sound dumb saying, well, no, actually, it's really sticky. It's what gets people to remember. If you're just using the technical language, that's not sticky. There's a reason why that's the kind of presentations that people don't remember. So that's usually where people get stuck. They say, "Oh, I feel really uncomfortable, like just making up these new cliches, if you will. Like walking on marshmallows, right? Like lighter than a cloud, all that kind of stuff. It feels fluffy, but it's the stuff that sticks with people.
Yeah, I've got to imagine, and I wonder, and I'm not expecting you to know off the top of your head, Leslie, but I imagine like these more creative type analogies have room to be sticky. It could also, I could see where it could also backfire. You know, you might want to test these out, but it feels like maybe the more visually descriptive it is, more like maybe you're thinking, getting the think of the sense, using all the senses, not just like maybe it's a cloud of smoke that you can smell.
Yes.
The burning campfire, or what I don't know, whatever.
Yes.
We could go crazy here, but like I'm wondering if the more you do it and the kind of more engaged, enriched, kind of without being over the top, maybe it sticks more.
Yep. When I would sit down with students, I would have the list. Here's your list of your senses. We're going to go all the way as far as you can, right? And that's right. Usually a really good way to go, right? Go as far as you can out there and then dial it back. It's hard to kind of push the door open this way. Go as far as you can and dial it back. Take each sense and think about how you connect it. And then you can kind of hone it in.
Yeah. So I do have to ask, because I can imagine there's someone who is maybe in a more, we talked about branding a little bit and the importance of staying kind of true to your corporate brand. Someone's going to say like, yeah, but I'm going to go to my senior leadership. I'm not talking about fluffy marshmallows with them.
Right. Exactly.
I will get laughed out of the room. So like, or even just it's too cliche, like in a dark and stormy night, that kind of like, I imagine like, are there boundaries here that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, the first boundary I would say, to your point, the dark and stormy night, if something is cliche, it actually loses that sense-rich message in our mind. There are things that we've heard so much, we don't actually connect to those anymore, like a dark and stormy night. We don't actually imagine the dark storm clouds and the cold rain. We don't do that anymore when we hear that phrase. So, my mentor said, hey, this is your opportunity to create the new cliche. What's something that folks have never heard before? You're using that imagery to create that new idea. If it's too cliche, it's not going to stick. What another really important thing is, it's tricky when you have a large group, but when you have a smaller group, being able to engage the community right there in front of you. So asking, what is something when you're thinking about, why you're uncomfortable with your own voice? What is it? What is it that you don't like? And then you start to get kind of their senses, their sense messages, and you can plug in theirs. And as you get better at this, you can do this on the fly as well. Like, your general idea, but also you want to use the language of the people in the room.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because one of the kind of questions lingering in the back of my head about this is that when so I'm presenting at conferences, right? Usually 50-minute blocks, right? 50 minutes. And I know my content really well. I know what I've been talking about for years. So it's not really hard for me to get up and talk kind of ad nauseum about the things that I talk about. But, the thing I think about with this, what this changes a little bit, it feels like, is perhaps then there are certain things that you're going to have to just commit to memory. Like, I would say, if you ask me, like, I could go through any of my presentations I've given in the last 5 years. What I have not done is I've not memorized them. I don't have like a key phrase. Like, I know at this point I say this, right? So I'm looking at my slides. I'm saying the things that I think are most important for the audience. Maybe I've asked them some questions, but I'm not I think keynote speakers do this a lot, right? They will have prepared TED Talks, right? They have prepared, they have memorized, it's 20 minutes versus 50 minutes. And so for this to work, does it need to be that type of presentation? Or is it just like, hey, have in your bank of things that you do, Like just kind of like you can pull these up as
Yep.
needed as it makes sense.
Yep. And it goes back to like what sounds legit, what sounds genuine. And it doesn't, again, my mentor, Dr. Joel Whalen, who I loved, he would say this, you're not all actors. You are not paid to do this for a living. So you're not really believable when you're reading a script.
Yeah.
You are believable when it's bullet points in your head and you're speaking from your knowledge. Of course, it comes from, to your point, Matt, like you have to have good knowledge of what you're talking about. You have to have a knowledge of your subject. But you have the bullet points. You should have your questions memorized, how you're starting, and you have your cold closing memorized. And everything else in between is bullet points in your head.
Okay. So I'm liking this because here's what I'm seeing the correlation is that we often have talked on this show about using scripts, and I'm still a fan of people writing scripts for videos. However, there is a much greater tendency nowadays, I think because things have changed in the world. Obviously, the world's been weird for the last couple of years. We're all been a little bit more familiar with being on camera, a little bit more familiar talking to a lens.
Right.
But I see also the need just for speed is often like so great inside an organization that someone needs to make a video, whether it's to communicate, whether it's to train, whether it's to do whatever, that this actually makes a really nice model for that, yeah, you don't have to write a full script, but you have a strong opening, you have a strong CTA or call to action at the end, but those in-between points, maybe whether you're demoing something, maybe you're talking through a procedure or, like some kind of I'm thinking a lot of how to, because that's what we talk a lot about, but could also be, just a message, right? But that hey, here's the highlights, and I'm going to talk to those points. But I do worry about is people going long. That and just even in this last minute, right? I'm like grabbing for the words. I'm taking way too much time. I should be hearing more from you, Leslie. So like, how do you help people? Like they've got the bullets, they've got their opening, closing. How do you help them condense that down so they're not going to go 20 minutes when they could have done 3 or 5?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to knowing a bit about yourself as well. I mean, I will be the first to tell you the way my mind works. I have a really good understanding of time and space, right? So, if I'm told I have 30 minutes, I can usually get that solid within 30 minutes. One of my best friends, it is not her gift. That's fine. There's just, I think that's different personalities, different people. And I think also culturally, there's a lot of different understandings of time and space that way. So I would say it's know yourself, presenter. So if you know that you have a tendency to go a little long, that is when those practice rounds are going to be your best friend. And a stopwatch is going to be your best friend, or maybe even someone in the audience, or knowing that the clock, knowing a clock is near you and having points where you say, oh, I need to look up. I need to make sure I'm checking.
Yeah.
It's tricky though. You're right. Like it is not everyone's gift.
Well, I mean, and I'm sure I've quoted this on the show before. It's often attributed to Mark Twain. The quote, "I did not have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead."
Yep.
We're all
Yes.
guilty.
Yes, exactly.
So let's talk about kind of the skill building process here for just a second, and pretty soon we'll have to go to our forgetting my words, our speed round questions. However, what I'm curious from a skill building standpoint, a couple things I can hear someone saying, kind of in their objections to this, right? Like, I happen to have a spouse who I love deeply, but she will tell you, she's like, I'm not creative in that kind of way, right? Like, it's the sensory stuff, not going to be able to think about it. So I want to think about like, first question, is there something that you would suggest people do to build that kind of understanding of how to build good sensory type of experiences? And then any resources or things that we could point to, because again, I think that drilling down, you did it so masterfully, but I could see until you've done it 10, 20, 30 times, you might struggle to really dig that down. So I know it's 2 things and I don't normally like to load up on the 2 things, but I want to make sure I got them out. So build sensory kind of skill, understandings, writing, imagery, development skills, and then building up how to dig down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start second first.
Perfect.
Yeah. So go with that image. Like I would say, create that chart. The chart, your first big idea, your takeaway, your big message, idea number one, idea number two, and then the four things underneath that, right? Create that every single time. And so you get that practice of writing it that way. As far as getting those creative ideas, those sense rich ideas every time, yeah, I think starting with, here's your senses, here's your list of senses, and going through there. Uh, but then, Uncle Google can be your buddy too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just or even Chat GPT, right? Like, okay, hey Chat GPT, I'm talking about being uncomfortable, and what are uh, five ways that five uncomfortable senses, five uncomfortable smells, five uncomfortable tastes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like use ChatGPT, use the technology you have, in front of you. Use a thesaurus, right? But just getting that practice in, and seeing, like you said, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I appreciate the use of technology you have. I imagine just also being aware of kind of what other people are doing. Listen to other really great speakers. What do they do?
Yes.
I would also suggest, just try some things out. Like,
Yeah.
throw it on paper and
Yeah.
see what happens. Who cares?
Just see
It's
what
paper.
happens. Yeah.
It's not even paper anymore. It's just a screen.
It's
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 digital pixels
it
that are going
really
to go
is.
away. So,
Yeah.
well, Leslie, this has been awesome. With our
Have
time though,
fun.
we're gonna move into our speed round questions. Which, if for people new to the show, speed round is quick questions with quick answers, determined by the roll of a 12-sided die. So let's go speed round. All right, so let's go over to our dice cam, all set up and ready to go. So let's roll the die. You ready, Leslie?
Let's do it.
Okay, first roll is in, and it's question number 10. Okay, so if you had the opportunity to shift careers out of the world of customer education, which you've been doing for a while, what would you do? It could be anything, no limits here.
No limits. If I could do anything, I would love to be. Um, I'd love to be a travel writer, a travel blogger. Travel the world with my family and talk about what it's like, you know, being a family of three on the road and our experiences.
That would be awesome, and that would be amazing.
Right?
How to
Right? That'd be so.
monetize it, I don't know, but it would be
I
amazing.
know some people do, and I'm incredibly envious of those folks.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go on to our next question. Great answer. Next question. Oh, we can't get this.
Oh,
Very
ten
rarely
again.
happens, so we're gonna let's do it again. That's a 4 this time.
Four.
Okay, so Leslie, what is your guilty pleasure song or movie that you secretly love? It obviously can't be so secret because you're telling the world right now, but what do you think?
I'm telling everyone. Oh, secretly love. I mean, I'm pretty straightforward, so I'm dorky enough to admit that the ones that are ridiculous. Um, Love Actually, we watch around every Christmas, and just it's like everything about it. The cheesiness about it is amazing. The singing about it is just joyful. It's perfect.
Awesome. And also, I believe it's a great reference if any of our friends out there are Ted Lasso fans. There's a great episode where there's a great reference
I
to Love
love,
Actually.
yes, absolutely.
Great episode. All right, last question. Last question here. Let's roll the die one more time. And that is a 6. And I always educate our dice folks because it's got a line underneath, so that's a 6. Okay, so share a piece of advice that you've received that has had a lasting impact on you. What's something someone has said to you or given you as advice that's had a lasting impact?
A lasting impact. I will say so. Since we're on this role of Dr. Whalen, my mentor, when I was thinking about doing my doctorate, I said, "Hey, Joel, can we? I want to talk to you about this." And We sat down and we went out, and he said, here's the deal. It is really hard on your family. So when you make that move to get a doctorate, it needs to be all hands on deck. And it needs to be a decision that's done with the entire team in mind. And that's was really powerful for me. And that's kind of how I decided to make the move and have my husband and my daughter fully on board before I started that move.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great advice, by the way,
Yeah.
on lots of
Yeah.
things. It reminds
Yeah.
me of when I was thinking about getting a doctoral degree, and my advisor said, you need to be really passionate. And he's like, I don't think you're really passionate. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh,
So,
thanks. Okay.
okay, I guess I better figure that out. Well, Leslie, I love chatting with you. This has been just fantastic. Before we wrap up the show today, if people wanted to reach out to you, they want to learn more from you, where should they connect?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's I'm Leslie Chamberlain, and yeah, I'm psyched to connect with anybody. I love mentorship. My dissertation is on mentorship, so happy to talk to folks about changes in careers, and find me there.
Awesome. Well, guys, go check out Leslie's stuff. She is a great resource. All right, Leslie, as we like to wrap up every show, what is your final take?
So here's my final take. What it comes down to, whenever you're doing any kind of presentation, whether you're doing it on video, whether you're doing it in front of folks in person, it comes down to your audience is building the relationship with you. Your slides, your images are not the presentation. You are the presentation. So as you go forward to present, be true to yourself, speak from your heart, and enjoy every minute of it.
Awesome advice. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Matt. This was so much fun.
Absolutely. And always great to have you on the show.
Yay, thanks.
You bet. All right, everybody, go check out Leslie's stuff. Talk about really practical, focused advice today about creating presentations. You can apply it to making videos. I'm sure it applies to many things that you can do. So go check that out. You can learn more. We'd love to have your feedback. We'd love to have your comments here. You can email thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. You can always like and subscribe on YouTube. That helps other people find the channel and make sure they're getting these awesome content creators and people that are just amazing to share their information and insights with us. If you're a podcast listener, we've got you covered too. Go like and follow on whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. We are there for you. Now, with that said, we like to wrap the show up the same way, the same advice, and it's cool because we talked about it today. The thing is, look, if you're making images, you're using video, you got to start. Just start making those, blow away the fog of discontent, move out the barriers of physical rocks that block your mind from being able to do this, and just get started. And we hope that you take some time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.